Hi, I'm Eileen Saeed. I'm in grade 12 in Dubai National School Al Tuwar. Today I will be doing a class on biology, specifically the photosynthesis process, and I actually have two students with me. I have Fatma and Anusha who will be taking this class for the first time, and they're going to be talking about their thoughts and asking questions as well. So, class, before we get started, let's talk about our objectives. We have three main objectives. We have the concept, which is basically what is photosynthesis, why is it important, just basics. Then we have all the steps. We're going to go into a bit more detail. We're going to talk about how it takes place and more in depth. And lastly, our third and final objective is just talking about the key terms and the vocabulary. So let's start with our concept. So, what is photosynthesis? Now, photosynthesis is the process in which green plants use sunlight and carbon dioxide and water to make their own food in the chloroplast of the plant cell, which usually takes place in the leaves. Now, before we talk about the importance of photosynthesis, I want you guys to guess, Fatma and Anusha, what do you think the importance of photosynthesis is? When you hear photosynthesis, what do you think it gives to us? What's the importance? Yes, Fatma.
It helps give food for the plants to give us oxygen.
Yes, that's a good point. Anusha, do you want to add anything? I guess not.
It produces oxygen.
Yeah, that's what Fatma said, but it is a good point, and it is one of the things we will mention. So, photosynthesis is important because it is necessary for life on Earth. Absolutely. We couldn't live without it. This is because without photosynthesis, there would be no food for the plants, and without the food for the plants, there would be no plants. When there are no plants, there's no food for the animals, and when there's no food for the animals, there's no food for humans to live and flourish on Earth. So photosynthesis is important in the aspect of food, but like you mentioned, it is also important because it produces oxygen, and both us and animals on the planet, on Earth, they need oxygen to breathe and to live, basically. So let's talk about all of the steps. Now, here is a diagram of how photosynthesis takes place to our eyes, I would say, because we'll get into the details of how it takes place in the chloroplast later. So, as was mentioned, the light it's penetrated through the leaves and it provides energy for the process to take place. Then we have carbon dioxide, which is just given from the air around, and it penetrates through the leaves as well. And we have water, which is given from the rain, or if you have a house plant, if you water your plant, it's the same thing. Ultimately, it comes from the rain. And the water travels through the roots and then into the leaves. And those are the three reactants for photosynthesis. The two main products are oxygen, which is given out and is used for us to breathe, and glucose stays in the plant as food. Now let's talk about the process in the chloroplast itself. So we have the light, we already mentioned it goes through the chloroplast to give it energy for the reaction to take place. Then we have water that is turned directly into oxygen. And then carbon dioxide that's turned into glucose. Now, I don't know if this is what you're thinking, but this might be what you're thinking. Why do plants need water if they don't need oxygen? Because it just takes carbon dioxide to make glucose. Why do they need water? Well, here we're gonna explain that point exactly. So, we have two different reactions: light reactions or light dependent reactions, and the Calvin cycle. So the light reactions take place in the thylakoids. Thylakoids are these disc-like structures where the light reactions take place in. Now you'll learn more about thylakoids in classes like AP Biology, but since this is just a regular biology course, we will not be getting into the AP Biology aspect, but the light reactions take place in the thylakoids, the disc-like structures. The input, as we mentioned, is light because light-dependent reaction, and water, right here. Those create ATP and NADPH. This comes from ADP and NADP+, but that is also for AP Biology, but this is important for this specific step. NADPH is used in the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma, which is the empty space in the chloroplast. So the Calvin cycle needs carbon dioxide and NADPH, which then creates sugar and NADP+, and the NADP+ is used as a cycle to go back to NADPH and ATP and ADP and so on. But this is why plants need water, because in order for the Calvin cycle to take place, we need NADPH. And in order to get NADPH, we need the light reaction to take place. So in this scenario, the products or the outputs for the light-dependent reactions is NADPH, which goes to the Calvin cycle. Carbon dioxide is added and glucose is produced. Now let's talk about respiration versus photosynthesis. Now, respiration, also known as cellular respiration, takes place even in our bodies. It's the exact opposite of photosynthesis. It takes place in plants and it takes place in animals as well, animal cells. Now, the difference is the complete opposite, like I mentioned. The oxygen, the gas that goes into respiration is oxygen, whereas the gas that comes out is carbon dioxide. And it's the opposite for photosynthesis, as you can see here. Another difference is the time. Respiration happens at all times. It doesn't need sunlight, whereas photosynthesis needs sunlight, which is why it takes place in daytime only. Now, if you don't know what respiration is already, without getting into details, respiration is the process where glucose or carbohydrates that we eat are broken down and give us energy. So the equation, which has not yet been mentioned, that we didn't mention yet, this is a balanced equation. For respiration is oxygen plus glucose equals ATP, which is energy, plus carbon dioxide plus water. So when you eat food and you breathe in oxygen, you get energy, you breathe out carbon dioxide, and you breathe out water as well. So if you just blow into your mouth, you can feel a little bit of water molecules on your hand. Then we have photosynthesis, which is the exact opposite. So we have carbon dioxide plus water plus the sunlight, which gives us glucose and oxygen. Now, lastly, let's just get into the vocabulary. So we already mentioned the sun, the water, chlorophyll, and the gases, so carbon dioxide and oxygen, and hydrogen as well. Hydrogen, yes, Fatma? You have a question?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's chlorophyll?
That's a great question because we're going to get into it in the next slide, actually. So that's a really good question. Here we go. So chlorophyll is actually the pigment that gives green plants their color. It also helps absorb energy from the sunlight to produce carbohydrates from the carbon dioxide and the water. So basically the glucose. It basically gives it its green color, and I'm going to explain how it does that. So chlorophyll absorbs colors like red, blue, orange, all of those colors from the light spectrum, except greens and yellows, and it reflects those colors because it doesn't absorb them. That's why the color comes out as green. Lastly, in our last slide, this is just to wrap it up. We're going to mention a new idea as well, but it's going to be very short and simple. So we talked about oxygen, which is released as a product in the photosynthesis process. We talked about carbon dioxide, which is taken in as a reactant. We didn't talk about hydrogen, but it is very important because it is used throughout the process. So when we take in oxygen when we take in H2O and we give out oxygen, hydrogen is mixed into those chemical reactions, and it's just very important throughout the process. It's not a product or a reactant, but it is included throughout the process. So before I end our session, I would like to ask, do you guys have any questions, anything at all? I'm free for answers. So any questions? Nothing? No questions? Is everything clear? Do you understand? If someone were to ask you about the photosynthesis process, you understand?
Everything.
That's great. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed Miss Eileen's biology class, and I hope we can do this again sometime. So thank you.
Thank you, Miss Eileen. Thank you, Miss Eileen.